Hello and welcome to another training for our VITA services for West Michigan. We're going to be going through one more and probably the last tax return that we're going to show you how to prepare through the TaxWise software. I'm going to do my best to incorporate as much as I possibly can, which is going to include a Schedule C for a private business. There's going to be the state information we're going to go through and some city information. So the first thing I like to do is we're looking at the Hannah Flemming example. Your supplemental material should be available for you. It should be pages 41 through 49. You should have all of that printed out. It's going to make going through this a lot easier, and you're going to see exactly where I'm going to get the information for this tax return if you're looking at that. So I'm going to jump right into the return. There's a lot of caveats and little things about this return. It's going to give you a really good practice and a really good review as to how to enter all the information. First, I'm just going to start with the interview notes, which is very important. The first 2 pages of the supplemental packet you have are the intake and interview information, but the interview sheet on page 44 that provides information outside of the intake and interview are the questions that you're going to want to ask and prod your client on as you're doing their tax return. So I'm just going to jump through and kind of review the information so that we're all on the same page. From the interview notes on page 44, Hannah was employed as an editor starting July 1st, 2009. She did some editing work out of her home for Candid Publishing Company, and they provided her that 1099 miscellaneous form that we need. She did keep a record of her expenses, the $1,625 for paper, the $1,047.50 for printer cartridges, the $1,250 for postage, and $350 for a business phone line, so she could make the long distance calls she needed. She also indicates that she had a total mileage for her business of 234 miles for making deliveries, and that she had $10,000 on her car outside of that for general commuting. She bought the car in 2007, and she has a written record of all of her business mileage. She also took a word processing course in an evening, during the evening at a local community college to improve her business skills, and tuition for that was $575. We have her business code listed and some of the information about the tuition information. Hannah's divorced, but also states that Jerry or indicates that her husband had paid alimony, or her ex had paid her alimony of $300 a month, but that he was only able to do so for 8 months due to a loss of a job. She indicates that she did receive Get Funds investment service, that she received a state exempt interest income of $418. So she doesn't have any documentation on that, but she did receive that. In January of the tax year, Hannah took out an IRA distribution of $5,000 to pay off a credit card debt. She did not itemize deductions last year. If there's a refund, she would prefer to have it by direct deposit. So we have her checking information in here. She owes anything, she'll mail in the payment. She indicates that there was a mistake on her intake and interview form, so we want to make sure we're correcting that in our tax return. As her address changes from 469 on her intake and interview form to actually 496 Booth's Way. She indicates that her children had daycare expenses, so we're going to want to take a look at that. She did have a serious accident in June of that tax year, and she had to stop working, so she collected unemployment, but she's too young to retire. So now she's considered totally and permanently disabled. Hannah's education expenditures could be used for either a business expense or a business expense, or for an education credit. We need to determine what the biggest advantage is for her on that. And then she also indicated that she has an identity theft PIN, and that she did not qualify for the premium tax credit, but she did have minimal essential coverage all year. So let's go ahead and jump through that information. We're going to log into the software. And we're going to go to New Return up in the upper left-hand corner for Hannah's return. On page 43, we have all of the household member social security numbers. I'm going to make this a little bit easier just for my sake. I'm going to enter a social security number. That's going to be a little bit easier for me to remember because I'm going to have to enter it so many times. We're going to go to the tax forms. And just like with all of our other tax returns, we're going to go ahead and just enter the household information. Again, we're going to go to the present address and remember that we have that corrected in our interview notes. And we have a phone number for Hannah. And her date of birth. Remember, we're going to skip over the foreign address information. We're not doing a Puerto Rico return, but Hannah did indicate that she is disabled and totally and permanently disabled, so we're going to mark yes right here. Hannah has 2 dependents, so she's going to be the head of household. It sounds like she provided more than half the support in the home. Her ex only provided just a few months of alimony. So we're going to enter the children's information. And Jerry is her son. He's in the home for all 12 months. Child who lives with her. There's dependent care expenses that we learned from our interview notes. And she did work some, so we'll see if she's eligible for any sort of earned income tax credit. So we're going to go through and enter Tara, her second dependent's information now. And again, there's dependent care information that we're going to enter, and then we're going to see if Tara provides any sort of earned income tax credit. So we're going to scroll down a little bit. We don't have any sort of indication of anything that we need to enter here. It's going to be a full year tax return, so we're going to enter the bank account information. So we have Hannah's information for her direct deposit listed over here. If you look through all your supplemental documents on page 48, we have the check information. So we're going to enter that. Then we're going to go down here and double check and see if there's any information we have to add. Right here, we're getting Hannah's consent to go ahead and electronically file the return on her behalf. And then here's that identity protection pin, so don't forget to put that in. That's from the intake and interview notes. So we can see that the pin is right here, the 459871. And that's all you have to do for that identity protection pin. It's that simple. So it looks like we got all of our main information page filled out, just double checking to make sure we didn't miss anything. I believe everything should be good there. And then next we're going to go to the next form that's highlighted red, the 1040 Affordable Care Act form. The 1040 ACA worksheet is what that stands for. Again, like in all the examples, it's indicating that there was minimal essential coverage and that everyone had full health care coverage all year. So we're just going to mark full. And then we're going to jump into our tax return. So on the 1040 page 1, let's start with some of these income statements that Hannah has and get those input into the tax software. So first I'm just going to start right on page 45 of your supplemental documents. I'm going to go through and just enter all the information off of these forms into the software that I can in case you're wanting to follow along with me. But I'm just going to start right here at the top with our wages. So we've checked here and it looks like the address is the same on the W-2 as it is on the client's intake and interview form. Then we're going to go down to employer's name. And so again, you can see with the forms automatically calculating, boxes 3 and 5 don't match what's on page 45 of that W-2. So I'm just going to go down to box 12 and see if once I enter that information, if all the wages and other codes boxes on the W-2 turn out looking like they should. So let's see what it looks like now. Well, our wages look correct and like they should, but it does look like we still have to edit box 4. So if you remember, you go up to this box on the W-2 form where it says check to take calculations off of lines 3, 4, 5, and 6. You check that box and edit the amount that was actually withheld to make it correct. We're going to enter the state information as well as the city information. And it doesn't look like there was any withholdings, but we're still going to enter Muskegon because if you read the state information, this address, this company that she worked for was actually out of the city of Muskegon. They were located in the city. So we'll go through that in a few moments once we get through the federal and then once we get through the state. So next we're on page 45. We're on the next piece of income. We're going to enter the unemployment income information. So we're going to go to line 19. We're going to open up a new form, the 1099-G, the unemployment benefits worksheet. I'm going to select that it's for the taxpayer. The payer's name we're going to enter is just Unemployment Commission. The EIN is going to be 241 and then whatever we want after that. So the unemployment benefits received, again, that's from box 1 on the 1099 form of the supplemental document, so the $1,344. The amount that Hannah had withheld was $135, so we're going to indicate that right here. And it doesn't show that she had any state withheld, so we're not going to worry about that. You're going to go ahead and enter, we're going to double check, go up here to our 1040 and start entering the next W-2. And so I'm on page 46 of our supplemental materials. Again, it looks like the address is the same that's on the W-2 that's printed. So we're just going to go ahead and put in this W-2 as well. Again, we're not doing any of the special characters, so no periods or anything like that. And again, we're just verifying this information doesn't quite look right. We don't have any more information in box 12 or 13. Gonna go through and enter the state information real quick, and then we're gonna go back up and edit the information to show that the W-2 matches what we put into the software. So everything looks good. Again, I'm going to type in Muskegon because we're going to have to do a City of Muskegon return. Actually, this employer was not in Muskegon. We'll say that all of the employers were in Muskegon, and that'll make things a little bit easier when we go do our city return. So we're just going to verify. So box 4 does not match up on the W-2 that Hannah's provided. So again, we just have to take the calculations off of box 4 and enter them correctly as what's on the W-2. And then we can verify that all these amounts are correct. And we'll go to this W-2 and do that as well. We've got our interest income that we have to enter. So we're going to go back to our page 1040, page 1. Again, we're just entering even more information. So we're going to take a look at this interest. So interest income. We're going to pull open the form, the existing Schedule B, the interest and ordinary dividends income worksheet. We're going to scroll down to this interest section, and then we're going to open up a form that will allow us to put that in, the interest statement. So we've got the interest statement that we received from the Northern Bank and Trust. So we're going to put their name right down as payer. And then the interest income, so box 1 and interest income is $417 once you round. And that's to the taxpayer. If you remember, and if we go over to our interview sheet on page 44 in our supplemental material, it indicates that Get Funds Investment Service had notified Hannah that she received $418 of federal and state exempt interest. So we want to make sure that we're entering that. If you're doing state exempt interest, and especially if somebody doesn't receive the documentation, but they're adamant that they did receive it, we want to make sure that we're entering it. So we're going to give a line item to that, to Get Funds Investments. Now, I'm going to be completely honest, you will rarely see this at the tax site. It goes under this, this box. We're going to enter an E and use this NAEOB column. This basically means that it's exempt from taxes, but we're still just going to enter it because we want to make sure we're doing our due diligence to enter all the information that the client provides to us and that we're doing the return as properly as we can. So because this sheet has a lot of, this interview sheet has a lot of different items on it, I am marking these off as we go to make sure I don't miss anything as we go through and enter all the different information for this client. All right, so we've got the interest income listed. I'm now moving on to page 47, the distributions that Hannah received for her income, making sure that everything else along the way has shown up. So you can see the regular interest as well as the tax exempt interest. It indicated that Hannah did not itemize last year, so we're going to indicate that no, that did not happen. And then we're going to go in and put in some of her pension distributions. So we're going to look at a new 1099-R. Again, the address on the form on page 47 of your supplemental material matches what is actually on the tax, on the source document, on the tax form, the 1099-R, and the address on the intake and interview match, so that's good. And then we're just entering the payer information. there was federal tax withheld, so we're going to indicate that over here. And again, we're just transposing all the information from the tax form just right into the software. Nothing too complicated once you get into the form you need. There's nothing else we have to enter there, so we're going to go back to our page 1 so we can enter the next distribution that was received on page 47 of our supplemental material. We're going to go down here back to pensions again. We're going to open another one, a new 1099-R, and we're going to do exactly the same thing, making sure that the address on the 1099-R matches what's in the software already. And we'll close out of that so we don't get any more of those notifications. Okay, and the gross distribution again, we're just transposing exactly everything we can right from the 1099-R. In box 7, we've got that code, and that is it for that 1099-R. And that's all the income information aside from the business. So let's jump into doing that Schedule C, so doing income for a small business. You can see, just double check, make sure all your other income has carried over. That looks great. So I'm going to jump into this business income. So if you go to line 12 where it says business income, and you select your little arrow and go to your forms tree, you'll see a list of new forms. You can do a long Schedule C, but really I like to do the Schedule C easy. You can choose either. It doesn't really matter for program purposes. I find that this form is a little bit easier. If you have a business that's a little more complicated, it might be a good idea to look at this regular Schedule C, but this CZ form should do most of everything that you really will need to do at our tax sites. So that's a form that I'm going to train you on and kind of show you how to use and work with within our software. So again, we're referring to page 44 in our supplemental material. There's a lot of information about the Schedule C and about Hannah's employment as an editor as she was contracted. So the name of the business is editor. It gives us the business code. You're always going to need to enter a business code. They're going to be listed at the tax site, so don't worry. It's not like it's a code you have to memorize. You just look them up kind of alphabetically. It's not too challenging or difficult. We're going to enter Hannah's address here because it's the same as her. We actually don't have to enter anything there because it's the same as what's on her tax return. If it's different, then you have to enter a different address here. It says, did you make any payments in 2014? Well, really, it'll be 2015 for this upcoming tax year, but did you make any payments that would require you to file a 1099? So what it's basically asking is if you had any of your own private contractors for the job, for this employment. You're going to answer no, and really we can't do any sort of tax returns that would require you to file this 1099 form, so we're going to answer no there as well. That's because we are doing very basic Schedule Cs, very basic small businesses. So we need to make sure that what we're doing is within our scope. Gross receipts, so it doesn't indicate that Hannah had any other income other than what was provided to her through the publishing company that was contracted on that 1099 miscellaneous form that's on page 48 of your supplemental material. So that's all we have to enter. So we're just going to enter that 1099 form. And then we're just going to go down to non-employee compensation because that's the only box that's filled out on this form. And that's pretty standard. You're going to see that for the most part with most of the tax returns that you do for these small Schedule Cs. You're going to make sure that that income carried over. It did. And then we're going to just list the expenses. So you'll open up, I like to do this in a scratch pad. There's really no other place to do it with any of the existing forms if you're doing the Schedule CZ. So I just open up a scratch pad and I list the expenses just to make sure I don't miss anything. The scratch pad is nice because if there isn't a form for something but you want to be able to list everything out so that you can see where the numbers come from, this is a good way to do that. So I'm just going to title this business expenses and list all the business expenses just in the order she did so that it's easy to read and I know where this information is coming from. So for paper, we're going to list the 1,625, printer cartridges. So this can be any expense for the business. There's a whole list I have attached in your supplemental documents to print out and to reference for your training purposes. I did include the Schedule C that provides a full list. It's also in your publication 4012 if you want a full list of expenses that you can use. For the most part, people seem to keep a pretty good track of what expenses are being used for their business anyway, but it's always good to go through and see if a person has any estimates for any other expenses that they paid out for their business. We want to make sure we're listing all expenses because what the expenses do is reduce the taxable income that they receive. It reduces the income they're being taxed on for their business. And it indicates over in this example that the tuition was $575. I can tell already that they're going to use that in the Schedule C because they're not giving us the EIN for the university, for that one university way, for that college that she attended. So I'm going to put the business expense right in here, tuition for class. I'm going to go down here, and that seems to match up with what's on the page 44 of your supplemental documents for the expenses. So I'm going to go back to our Schedule CZ, make sure that the math seems to be coming out right, and then just put in the vehicle information. So it indicates that Hannah has one car that she bought in 2007 for the purposes of work. We don't have a specific date, so I'm just going to put '06. I always put just halfway through the year if there isn't a specific date, and usually people don't have a specific date. It's not that big of a deal. And then you have to put in how much she used the vehicle just on her own for her own commuting, so we put that information in. And then the vehicle is available. She uses it for everything, for her work vehicle and non-work vehicle, so she uses it for public use. So she doesn't have another vehicle, and then she has written documentation of her mileage. So then we're going to go back to our page 1 because we're all set with that Schedule C. It was really that easy. Again, you just put in the business information at the very top. You put in any of the gross receipts. So it might be a 1099. If they had just cash income, you could put that on a scratch pad. But we try to account for all of the cash in the business. We listed that all the business expenses over on the scratch pad, and the difference between the two is the net profit of the business, obviously. It's reduced again based on vehicle information as well, so it's good to include that. So we can see over here that we have the business listed, and then we have all the other information for income that we put in, so that's good. And we've got our deductible part of our self-employment tax listed, so we are actually in pretty good shape. Alimony was received, but it wasn't paid, so we're not going to do anything there. So really, what we're going to do is we're going to go over to our page 2, take a look at all of the different income that's listed and how everything's being calculated. That looks good over here. If you remember, there was some dependent care expenses, so now we're going to take a look at that non-refundable credit and get what we can for that. So if you remember on the intake and interview notes on page 44, oops, I went to the wrong option. You go to your dependent care expenses, open up the form 2441. So we're reading from page 44 that Hannah paid Lucas Tiny Tots. And put in the address that she's provided. And we have the EIN, which is so important. And the total paid, 1793. So then what you'll do is you'll go down, we've got Tara and Jerry showing up because we indicated that both of them were in the daycare, as it does in the intake and interview notes that are listed on page 44. And so if you divide the total amount, the $1,793, that equals $896.50. So because the program rounds to whole numbers, we're just going to say that one of the children's daycare expenses was $897, and then the other one was $896. And so this amount matches that amount for the $1,793. And you can see the child and daycare expense credit is listed right here. So that should be showing up on page 2. Let's confirm that that's listed. Yep, and there everything is. We got our child care credit. So it looks like everything got reduced to a 0 tax. So it's basically the refundable credits that should be listed. So yes, we can see the federal withholdings, the earned income tax credit, and the additional tax credit. We're going to go through and just check our earned income tax credit worksheet, make sure that the children are eligible to receive that the taxpayer is eligible based on the children's information, and that she is eligible to receive the tax credit. So we've got, does the taxpayer have a social security number that allows them to work? Yes, that's in fact correct. Was the taxpayer a non-residential alien for any part of the year? No. And could the taxpayer be the qualifying child of another person? No. Both Jerry and Tara were not married. They lived in the United States for all year, and no one else should be is entitled to claim them. No one else should be claiming them. They also have social security numbers. It doesn't indicate anywhere on our intake and interview notes that there's been any sort of issues with the earned income tax credit in the past, so we're going to just mark no here. And then we can see our earned income tax credit is showing up properly. So on our last page, we're just again double checking and verifying that everything is flowing over as it should. And everything looks good here. So we're going to go ahead and put in the account information for the client from her check. And then we're going to just checking for her. So first, before I do that, I'm just going to verify that we've indicated that Hannah, we have her small business listed. We don't do anything with her alimony except for on the state side, so we're going to take a look at that in a moment. We've listed Hannah's $418 in interest. That's not taxable. We input the information on the $5,000 from the IRA distribution. We've indicated that because there is a refund, we're going to do the direct deposit, so we've got that information input. We've looked at the intake and interview form, and we've corrected the address on the tax return that we've prepared. We've provided the information for the dependent care credit. We've listed Hannah as permanently disabled. We've also indicated that Hannah's expenditure is best listed as a business expense. And then we've also, and that's basically because the self-employment tax, if you go up here, is one of can be a pretty large cost to the taxpayer. So what we're really trying to do is work over here to reduce any tax above that we can. So it's going to be best, like I said, if you just look at the Q's in your worksheets, that Hannah actually uses that as a business expense. So we do know that. Hannah let us know about her identity theft PIN, so we put that in on the main information page, and we did indicate that Hannah has all healthcare coverage, so minimal essential coverage for her and all family members. So next we're going to just go over to the state information that we need to input on this. Oh, but it looks like this is red. So it's asking, and this is for that retirement savings credit, it's asking if Hannah was a student, and no, it doesn't indicate that she was anywhere, so we're going to check that box that no, she's not a student. So again, we're just going to jump into our Michigan 1040 tax return. Again, this should be pretty easy considering we have all the information from the federal that flows over. If we're taking a look at our supplemental materials, we're on page 49 to give a little bit of information. We know from that page 49 that the school district code is going to be 16060. And again, your volunteer folder is going to have all this information in it, so you'll be able to reference that very easily. This is one thing that you haven't seen in the previous examples. So like I indicated, Hannah is permanently disabled, so it's asking you to indicate that there's one person that's permanently disabled in the home, and that's why it's highlighted red. So you do have that to remind you to put in that special extra exemption for someone that's permanently disabled. So we've indicated that on page 1, and we have our tax liability listed, so that looks good. We're going to go to our page 2 of our Michigan 1040, and again, this is just where we indicate that there's no use tax. And we're going to scroll down and take a look. We're going to want to electronically file the tax return, so we're going to select yes. We're going to select over here that we want the same direct deposit as the federal return, and that the bank account is not located outside of the United States. So no, it's not. Then it says if you look at page 49 with the state information, it indicates that Hannah lives in a home that she received during her divorce settlement, that the taxable value is $42,000, and we have the summer and winter tax bills listed as well. So we're going to go on our Michigan credit form. The school district code, like I said, is listed already that we had entered. We're going to scroll down. Remember, we've got this line for homeowners first. So it says enter the taxable value of the homestead. So that's what we'll in fact do. It's $42,000. And then for the property taxes levied, we're just going to enter that here. I like to enter it on a scratch pad just so I can make sure that the math is done correctly. And like I said, it provides an example of where we're getting the information that's showing up on the lines. So it's property taxes, there's summer first, and then there's winter taxes. Then we'll go back to our page 1, and it's showing that there's a credit that's being calculated. So we've got the information put in. This is actually where we want to put in our alimony income. So it says right here, alimony and other taxable income described. Oh, and this is something that I missed. Did I actually put the alimony in on our 40, our federal 1040? I don't think I did. I didn't. So here's the alimony received that should have flowed over and it didn't. So I'm glad. As you go through, it's a good way to check things. So we're going to do a scratch pad and just explain that there was alimony received because it's not child support. If it had been child support, then you would only have to enter that on the state information. However, because it's alimony, Hannah does have to declare this. So it was $300 per month for 8 months. And so that's going to be $2,400. Again, we're just double checking anything with a red line as we go back through. And then we're going to go over here and just verify that that alimony income did in fact show up, and it did. So there it is. And there is not any other income information we have to put in. So that looks correct. We're going to go down here and you can see that the self-employment tax showed up as an adjustment. If there was any medical, so just on a whim, let's just ask, say we asked Hannah if she had any medical premiums she paid out of pocket. She said no, but then we asked her if she paid any sort of, if she had insurance covered under her car. She indicates she did pay for insurance for full coverage on her car. So we're going to go open up a scratch pad and we can call this auto insurance. And as I indicated in the state training, this is exactly where you enter that information. So health premium for auto insurance, that we can enter the standard $130. So again, we're just going to go, and verify that all our information is being carried over and shows up on the tax return. It does. And it looks like a property tax credit is calculated for $475. Again, if Hannah had been renting a home, we would put rental information in on page 3, but she's not. So if it's a regular rental situation, it's this part 4. If the person lives in some sort of subsidized housing or housing that is based on income, it goes under this part 5. We don't have to enter anything there because that's not the case with this example. It does indicate that Hannah has her heat bill, so she wants to verify to see if she is eligible for a home heating credit. I can take a look here. So first what you'll do is you'll enter, what I do first, just to provide a shortcut, is what I do first before anything is I take a look at the total household resources. If the household resources are higher than this maximum standard amount, then I don't even go through the process. I say it looks like you're going to be over income. But just for good measure so that you can get a better idea and can review the information about how to put home heating credit information in again, I definitely want to go through this with you. So first you'll enter county code. Again, that's going to be listed in your volunteer resource folder. And then you're going to answer these 4 questions. Do you own or rent your home? Yes, Hannah owns her home. And are the heating costs included in your rent or in someone else's name? No, they're not either of those things. Hannah does not want her name referred to any other assistance programs, and she doesn't receive Social Security income. but we do have the total amount that she paid for the heating. She indicates that she had paid 2 propane bills, one for $232, so that's going to actually be $233, and one for 100 and when it's rounded $180. So we're going to put a total of $413 in right here because that's what the $233 and $180 totals. So you can see here we've got all the information put in. This form is not highlighting in any way, so that means that she's not eligible. And again, like I said, if you go to page 2, it can break everything down by income amount, and based on how many dependents are in the home, that's where these numbers come from. The program automatically calculates it, so it's not anything that you need to worry about, but that's where they come from. So lastly, before we finish up the return, we just want to go through some city information. So I'm going to go through, and because there wasn't any withholdings for the city, I indicated that the one of the employers that Hannah worked for was located in a city. So a portion of that income needs to be taxed. And we're going to go through, this is going to be a very good example for what you'll see. So we're just doing a Muskegon tax return for a non-resident because we indicated that Hannah actually lives in Norton Shores. She does not live in the city of Muskegon, but she did work in the city. So we're going to indicate that she's a non-resident of the city of Muskegon. So there's a couple of different ways you want to go through and just verify information. So you can see right now that all of Hannah's income is being taxed for the city, even though only one of her income sources should be taxed at 0.5%. So first we're going to go into the exclusions portion of this worksheet. And we're going to exclude some of the income. So it was, if we want to go through and verify what income source had worked in the city, it was the Bellwood World Herald, and that none of the income was taken out to be taxed. So if you go to that exclusion worksheet that had just come up, we're going to go through and we're going to exclude the wages. And how do you do that? You'll go to this, it says right at top, wages and excludable wages. So these wages are not excludable, but these wages are. So we're going to indicate on this form, oops, you do it up here, excludable wages, so 2532. Then we're going to go back over to the worksheet and make sure, yep, so there's that. Actually, these can be entered right here. So you can exclude the 417 because that's not taxable because she wasn't living in the city. So you can go through and use this column to exclude wages. The only ones that will bring you up to another worksheet are wages. But everything else, if it wasn't earned right in the city, then you can just exclude it right here. So once you do that, you should see that only this amount is being taxed. We've got the exemption, so even for city taxes, everything is exempt. And it's only taxing the one income source at 0.5%, and you can see that over here. So you can see that there's $45 for taxes due. And you'll go through and you can just verify, like I said, so this is the only income that should be taxed because that's the only income that was earned in the city of Muskegon. The exemptions are applied, so that reduces the taxable income to this amount. And then 0.5% of that amount is this. And because there wasn't anything withheld at all, you would see that over here if it had been. So that's the amount that's owed for the client working in the city of Muskegon, even though she lived in the city of Norton Shores. For people that are mailing a balance due, I always recommend that they just mail a check. So we're going to indicate that right here. And then we're going to go through this last part that we need to fill out. You'll see the form is lit up red in your trees column. We want to go through and indicate Hannah's address at the bottom of this tax return to show the city of Muskegon that Hannah actually didn't live in the city of Muskegon, that she lived in the city of Norton Shores. So we just show the address that she actually lived at. Even though it says city right there, Norton Shores is a city within a city. So she lives in the city of Norton Shores in the county of Muskegon. And then there's the city of Muskegon and the county of Muskegon, and that's how that all works out. And that she lived there all of the tax year, so we don't need to worry about her owing anything. And we're not going to allow anyone to discuss the tax return with anyone else. So that is an example of a city return, and that is all of the Hannah Flemming tax return. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. You'd always go up to the Run Diagnostics. It looks like there's a place that the routing numbers didn't match, and that's one of the examples of something that can come up as an error when you go to enter information. So I'm just going to go through and verify the routing numbers. This number doesn't match, so we just want to go through, and the last thing I would do is get all the different routing numbers to match on the main information page as to what's in all of the different places where we put the routing number. So you run your diagnostics, and that is it for the Hannah Flemming tax return. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. I'm happy to go through anything on any of these practice returns with you, or otherwise, just let me know. Thanks, and thanks for watching the demonstration.